Hello there ladies and gentlemen, Paul TX141 Walsh here, welcoming you to an all new piece of Armoured Warfare gameplay today on our channel. In this instalment we're going to be doing something slightly different, as we are going to be taking a first impressions look at an all new MBT we recently unlocked. And that is, I can say with pride, the British Challenger 1. This is represented in game as a Tier 7 MBT, forming a part of the Western European MBTs within Shishkin's dealership. And my goodness ladies and gentlemen, I am absolutely loving this vehicle, and the gameplay you're going to see today is my third PvP game in it. In the meantime, I have been upgrading this vehicle via some player versus environment matches to the point where I've got enough upgrades to feel confident to go into PvP matches. And so, this vehicle is not fully upgraded, and we'll come onto that very shortly, and at the same time the setup we are using today is a temporary one for now, where we're experimenting with our setup and may not be the final setup that we decide to use in the future. But anywho, let us take a look at our setup for today. Starting with the upgrades we currently have for this vehicle then, we can see that we have unlocked the first armour upgrade, i.e. the Mark III Explosive Reactive Armour, ERA, and the Pleek Armour package, and we have unlocked all of the firepower upgrades for this vehicle. For our commander, we're once again calling upon the talents of Viktor Kirsanov, reason being that Viktor's skill set will allow us to buff the overall characteristics of our MBT in terms of its survivability and being able to rain down damage onto our opponents. For our first skill, we have Determination, buffing our reload time by 6% for 10 seconds after bouncing a shot against an enemy vehicle. At Tier 7 upwards, there is a very high likelihood when we engage our fellow MBT counterparts at close range that we will need to aim for particular weak points when both sets of frontal armour are facing each other, i.e. ours and theirs. And this means that we are aiming for very particular spots and have a chance of missing those targets when we are stationary and instead causing our round to ricochet off the enemy's armour. And if our opponent is moving or we are moving, the chance of a ricochet is even higher. So as a result, for every round we ricochet, we need to be able to put the next round into the soft spot as quickly as possible. For our second skill we have Patch It Up, which improves our vehicle's overall repair rate by 10%. And this is to counter the usage of high explosive shells, which are very likely to knock out our modules. Not just enemy artillery, whereby we do attract the attention of enemy artillery quite a bit in this vehicle, but also other MBTs, light tanks, AFVs, etc., whereby they will try to use high explosive against us when they cannot get through our frontal armour and do not have the ability to flank us. And we need our tracks up wherever possible to prevent our opponents from flanking round us, as we are not the most mobile vehicle. For our third skill, we are using Overpower, which causes our module damage to enemy vehicles to be increased by 20% for 15 seconds after getting an overmatch. Now, whilst it is not our intention to go up against enemy AFVs and lightly armoured vehicles in general, and instead we are going to take the brunt of the firepower in terms of going head-to-head with enemy MBTs, if we do happen to bump into AFVs, and in particular fire armour piercing rounds and get that overmatch, we want to be able to boost the damage we do to the AFV, knocking out modules wherever possible. As the only other round we have available to this vehicle is a high explosive squash head round, and these are not always reliable at actually penetrating a target, as even AFVs and light vehicles do get slight boost in armour as we go to Tier 7 upwards. And for our fourth skill, we have Zero In, which causes our aim time to be reduced by 10% for 15 seconds after damaging an enemy module. Now this is incredibly useful in those close range engagements against heavily armoured MBTs where we are trying to aim at weak spots and also aim towards cupolas, whereby when we hit these weak spots on cupolas it is very likely we will damage a module such as a gunner's sight or knock out a crew member. And when this occurs in particular, we want to be able to reduce our aim time for hitting those modules, not the crew members necessarily, and being able to put another shot right into that spot and to do some damage if not the full damage potential of our gun. And for our fifth and final skill, we have Leadership, which boosts our crew stats by 4% and enables us to get more out of the vehicle in general in terms of our reload rate, our aim time, and our overall accuracy, as well as our turret traverse. Crew-wise, all of our crew are currently at level 3, and our driver Georgia Lewis has the skill of Spin to Win, which improves our hull traverse speed by 10%. In general, the hull traverse of the Challenger 1 is rather sluggish, and we need to maximise this wherever possible to try and prevent our more mobile foes, whether they be AFVs, wheeled tank destroyers, or even the more mobile MBTs such as the T-72A and T-80 from getting on our flanks and putting rounds into us. We always want our frontal armour pointing towards our opponents when they try to come around in order to make sure that we can survive to the end of the game. For our gunner, Eugene Ibrahim, we have the skill of Marksman, where our peak accuracy, i.e. when the accuracy circle is smallest, be improved by 20%, and this enables us to narrow down our aim on the weak spots of enemy MBTs in the front and make sure that our rounds will go into these weak spots, penetrate and do the maximum possible damage. At the same time, when we are engaging opponents at longer distances, this also gives us a greater chance of hitting our foes as they are driving across the battlefield at ranges in excess of 400 metres. And for our loader, Patricia Wilson, we have the skill of Rapid Fire, reducing our reload time by 2.5% and just enabling us to essentially get off more rounds per minute and thereby maximising our damage per minute. In terms of our ammunition loadout, we have 48 rounds available, and our first 38 will be the 120mm L26A1 armour-piercing fin stabilised discarding Sabo rounds. These have an average damage of 438 for an average penetration of 423mm, meaning these rounds are right in the middle in terms of their overall potential, lacking by comparison with, say, the Russian and Chinese guns available on other Tier 7 MBTs, whereby these 125mm cannon have higher penetration, if not higher damage on average as well. Our other 10 rounds are going to be the 120mm L31 high explosive squash head rounds, whereby we are going to use these rounds in those encounters at close range when we are presented with the front of an enemy MBT which we simply cannot penetrate, but we still want to do some damage to without resorting to shooting at cupolas for the reduced damage that would be provided in our armour piercing rounds. These rounds have an average penetration of 26mm, but that is not important. What is important here is our non-penetrating damage, which can vary from 58 to 282 hit points. We will typically aim at turret rings, guns and lower frontal plates in order to try and boost this damage to at least its halfway point, if not to its maximum. For our consumables, we are using the standard trio of repair kit, first aid kit and fire extinguisher. And for our retrofits, of which we only have the universal slot available at the moment, we are implementing the advanced MRS Mark 1. This is meant to improve the normalisation of our armour piercing rounds by an angle of 2 degrees. Thereby we are going to improve the likelihood of our rounds penetrating targets when we strike them at a given angle, i.e. when we are striking sloped armour, which is prevalent at Tier 7 upwards. Now what does this mean in layman's terms exactly? Well, when you strike an enemy vehicle's armour, the ideal situation is when you strike the armour as it is completely flat, i.e. at a normal angle, and we call this 0 degrees. When your shell strikes the armour, but not at this angle, but at a slight angle, say 10 degrees, the normalisation effect of Advanced MRS Mark 1 is meant to reduce the effective angle at which your shell struck the target. So if you hit the target at a 10 degree angle, this normalisation effect will actually mean you struck the target at an 8 degree angle, increasing the chances of your round going through the armour. I must admit this is the first time I have implemented Advanced MRS on any given vehicle in Armoured Warfare, so as a result I do not know whether the net benefit is worth the cost, and I will gradually experiment with the Challenger one, seeing whether Advanced MRS is effective by using the vehicle with it and without it, and I will give you an update on this, ladies and gentlemen, in the future. Finally, coming on to our vehicle stat card then, we have already discussed how our alpha damage and overall penetration are moderate at best compared to other Tier 7 MBTs, but when we move to our sustained damage, things become more respectful, whereby we have an average damage per minute of 3,388 for a reload time of 7.76 seconds, and we will be able to boost this in the future with the intercom systems in our technology retrofit slot. In our defence, this is where we excel, whereby our base hit points is 2,495, and if I remember correctly, this is the highest value when stock for any Tier 7 MBT by a distance. And carrying this through to our armour, which this vehicle was famous for historically, and this is replicated very nicely in the game, our hull and turret are made out of composite armour. But in further detail, this is the infamous Chobham armour as invented in the United Kingdom, which is essentially a type of ceramic vehicular armour, also fitted to the M1A1 Abrams. This means that we have the following hull and turret modifiers: against armour piercing and high explosive 1.55 and against shaped charges 2.70. Going through our armour profile in detail then, starting with armour piercing and high explosive and talking about the turret and hull in turn. At the front we have 676mm and 550mm, in the side 543mm and 426mm, and in the rear 186mm and 124mm. Against shaped charges, things only get better. At the front, 1177mm and 959mm. in the side 945mm and 743mm, and in the rear 324mm and 216mm. And we should also consider that this vehicle has explosive reactive armour on the lower front plate, the bottom portion of the upper front plate, and in the sides, making it even more impenetrable to shape charge rounds. And with this we come back to our stat card once again, whereby our mobility demonstrates that our maximum speed is decent at 55.8 km an hour, but unfortunately it's going to take us a while to get to this speed, seeing as our acceleration from 0 to 32 km an hour is 10.5 seconds. So we're going to be in no rush to get from A to B, and will fall behind our teammates to an extent. We carry through in terms of utility, whereby we're not exceptional again. If we are going to snipe, we will need an AFV to spot for us, as our camouflage of 0.048 means that when we do fire at a distance, we have a very high chance of being spotted, and that is where we're going to use our very tough armour in order to stay alive. And with a view range of 360 metres, it is very likely we will be spotted before we spot our opponents, so we need to get in close in the midst of a city, or at least a more densely populated mountainous region, and try and force our opponents to confront us head to head. But back in the targeting department, this is once again where we excel to an extent. Our gun depression is not as good as our predecessor, i.e. the Chieftain, whereby our gun depression over the front is only 7 degrees, but this does mean that we can place some gradual ridgelines effectively. And whatever we must do, we must never, ever let a vehicle get directly behind us at close range, as we cannot depress our gun over the rear of this vehicle. Instead, we have to elevate it by 2 degrees. So low profile vehicles will be able to get right behind us and pummel us, and we will have trouble hitting them in return. Our turret traverse is rather respectable, and we will be able to keep a track of foes who are trying to flank us at moderate distances, with our turret traverse being 30.8 degrees at the moment, i.e. per second. Our accuracy is very good, 0.08 degrees. This does mean that at longer distances we have a very high chance, so long as we can predict the movement of our foes, of being able to hit them outright, and even when firing, having not aimed in fully, we have a good chance of hitting our foes at closer ranges. This also does mean at closer ranges, when we are fully aimed in, we have a very good chance when we aim at weak spots of actually hitting the weak spot directly, i.e. a driver's hatch or a cupola, and striking it for an effective penetration. Our aim time is not that commendable, but it will do, 2.73 seconds, which means it will take us a little bit of time to aim in, but not as long as some of the more heavily armed MBTs at our tier, looking at the T72A, or in particular the T80, with the longer aim times. But enough talking about the stats, let us get into our gameplay for today. Today we're on the standard rendition of the map Port Storm. This is a predominantly tier 7 game, with 2/3 of both teams being made up of tier 7s and the rest tier 6s. Looking at the enemy team's composition, there are two things we need to take a note of straight away. Firstly, that the enemy team have a significant number of light tanks and wheeled tank destroyers, i.e. Centauri 120s and Stingrays, all vehicles which can flank us out in the open quite easily and put shots into our more limited side and rear armour, as whilst it is strong, it will be cut apart with their rather powerful guns. The second point of interest is the enemy artillery at tier 6, the Akatsaya, if that is how you pronounce it. It is very likely, due to our very strong armour profile in general, that the Akatsaya will focus us down if we are spotted, or if our friendly Challenger 1s are spotted, and with their 3-shot auto-loader and high explosive rounds in tow, we are not going to be able to hold up to their firepower for too long, even with our extended health pool. And with our exposed external fuel tanks on the rear of this vehicle, we have a very high chance of being set on fire by enemy artillery. So we're going to mitigate these two threats by taking a different approach. Instead of going out on the open flanks, which we would typically do even in MBTs up to tier 5, a tactic I personally normally use, I go down the western side of the map, as depicted by the minimap, using the top of the minimap as the northern compass point. We're instead going to go through the port region, i.e. the centre of the map. We intend to use the train tracks, the containers, the ships and the port buildings to all shield us from the enemy artillery if we are spotted, and at the same time set up alleyways, whereby, as we can see here, the train tracks surrounded by abandoned trains and shipping containers will confine us to pointing our frontal armour towards our opponents, or alternatively pointing our rear armour to those who would flank us. But those who would flank us will most likely be proxy spotted by us as they head down an adjacent alleyway. So this means that we will be able to challenge our foes quite easily and be prepared for when we are being flanked. And by going down these alleyways, our frontal armour is always pointing towards our foes as well as our main gun, so we will never be caught by surprise. and we are supported here by a friendly T-80 and a Challenger 1, as well as a Stingray 2 who is bringing up the rear. We can see this approach already coming into effect as we make our way towards the centre and notice an enemy T-80. Unfortunately, because our shell was not fully aimed in, we hit their tracks. But we carry our momentum forward nonetheless, as it seems only the T-80 has pressed this way, with the majority of the enemy team heading to the northwest and a good portion of the enemy team also going for the centre. Now we decide to put a shell into the side of the T-80's armour, as whilst it was at a very severe angle, it is only roughly 80mm thick if I remember correctly, meaning that a 423mm penetration shell on average will cut through that even at the most severe angles, and we managed to ricochet their 125mm shell in return. And we gradually make our way out at a slight angle here, pointing towards the ledge region in grid squares E6 and E7, because there could have been a wheeled tank destroyer hidden there, and we would have been able to use our frontal armour to ricochet their shells. But as there was no vehicle there, we decided instead to push forward onto the T-80 and redirect our frontal armour towards them, slightly angling it as well to increase the chances of ricochets. Now as we continue to fire in, the T-80 continues to give us their side armour, and they are tracked in position by one of our friendlies. As we go to put in the final shot, they are knocked out by our friendly Stingray 2. But we are also now being shot at by an unidentified assailant up on the hill in roughly grid square C4. Because of the fire rate of this enemy vehicle, we are assuming it could potentially either be a light tank, or alternatively an MBT with a higher fire rate. But enough of that, we have to put a round into a Leopard 2AV instead, who is firing high explosive at us, and it appears we are also receiving hits now to our cupola from this unidentified assailant up on the hill. We see a round come from them, but the Leopard 2AV is also continuing to shoot at us with a high explosive, and we unfortunately just clip the rear of their vehicle, and our shot has no effect on them. We fire a shell up into the mountainous region, but now we have to change tact, as the enemy artillery with their autoloader is starting to zero in on us. 2 shells go wide, but the third makes its mark. And we do not want to continue to lose our health, so we reverse. And instead we are now going to support our friendly T-72A, T-80 and Challenger 1, and also our Stingray 2. Reason being, they are engaging the enemy Challenger 1s, and we need to knock these vehicles out in order to secure the win. As if these two vehicles coordinate themselves effectively, they can really help their team to get things back on track, even though we are 14-12. We put a shell into the side of the Challenger 1's turret here, as they are trying to concentrate on one of our friendlies, and our friendly T-80 knocks them out. We now carry our momentum forward to assist our teammates in finishing off the other Challenger 1, currently at full health, just shy of 3000 HP, thanks to retrofits, but their health is going to very quickly disintegrate. We absorb a round from the enemy artillery here, most likely destined for the T-80, but we have the health pool to deal with that. We try firing a round into the side of the Challenger 1. Unfortunately, it does not penetrate due to the ERA plating and the stronger side armour on the Challenger 1, it seems, towards the frontal half of its side armour. We take some probable aim-ins at the vehicles up on the hill, but realise it would probably be more effective to knock out the Challenger 1 here and not waste our ammunition. So we check the Challenger 1 in place and then put a round into their rear side armour to finish them off, with the rear side armour eyed towards the engine being weaker than the frontal side armour. And by tracking them in place, we pick up a little bit more renown. Now we carry our momentum forward here. We could have gone and flanked the Leopard 2AV, who is gradually pushing through, but they have very little health and will be knocked out shortly. So instead, we need to make the most out of our armour, our gun, and the time we have. So we are going to push towards that central hill region and start spotting more enemy vehicles, or at least keep them spotted, and draw their attention away from our friendlies. So we put some pressure here on the enemy Stingray, and because of our 7 degrees of gun depression, we have to come out a little bit further around and get tracked in position. But we use our repair kit to go forward, the Stingray pulls back and reverses into a shell from our friendly Challenger 1, and we now head down the hill as we take 2 artillery shells from the enemy artillery, doing quite a bit of damage to us once again, and their third round goes over into our other Challenger 1, not us, but one of our other friendly Challenger 1s. And we continue forward here with the enemy team now disintegrating, where one of the enemy vehicles, the Centauri 120, is trapped over on the northwestern side of the map, and we're just going to push through and come around the back of this central hill region, i.e. the grid square C3 and C4, whereby there's an enemy XM1 which is pretty much limping away from the battle, and our friendly T-80 is going to finish them off. And we also spot, well, our teammate spots the T-80, a Centauro, who it would seem has decided to join into the game. Unfortunately has not been able to connect, so we're going to use them to get a little bit of extra damage off. Unfortunate, but that's the way it goes sometimes. Put 1 shell in, we finished them off. So now it is just the enemy artillery, and our friendly Stingray is pushing round the eastern side of the map, i.e. the northeastern corner, spots the enemy artillery, We aim in and put a shell into them for maximum effect, and our team secures the win. So with that, let us take a look at the post-game stats. Well, that was a rather good game, and one could say that we used the strengths of our Challenger 1 rather effectively in order to help our team secure the overall victory. As standard, we picked up 3,184 reputation and 150,289 credits. Our three major contributions towards this were total damage of 4,689, 1,685 spotting damage and 6 assists. We were also able to pick up 2 awards, firstly Master Gunner for having an accuracy, i.e. striking the target of our rounds, of over 80%, having fired over 10 rounds and at the same time dealing at least 1,000 damage to our opponents, and we also picked up the gold medal for coming first on our team by reputation earned as part of the winning team. Looking at our individual performance then at a high level, we can see that our 4,689 damage was attributed across a wide range of enemy vehicles, not just the T-80 we caught out in the open at the start of the match, even though we did wipe off over 2/3 of their health. This meant that we could pick up our 6 assists, and by taking the proactive in-your-face approach of pointing our frontal armour towards our opponents at medium to close range, we were able to pick up 7 spots and pick up a good portion of spotting damage because we got close enough to our opponents in order to keep them spotted for the rest of our team, i.e. looking at one of the Challenger 1s there and also the Stingrays. And thinking back of it, we managed to pressure one of the Stingrays to reverse away from us when we tried to put pressure on them to reverse into the firing line of one of our friendly Challenger 1s. We should also note that we picked up 2 kills, providing us with a 10% multiplier to our overall reputation earned, but not too major a multiplier today, as our overall emphasis was on doing damage and not picking up the kills here. Looking at our performance by comparison to the rest of our team, we can see that we came first both in terms of reputation earned and damage dealt, although not by too significant a margin, whereby the second and third place players on our team, i.e. the T-80 and Challenger 1 who supported us through the centre of the map throughout the game, came quite close to us, and then there is a distinct division in terms of reputation earned down to 4th place and beyond. As a result, one could say that the 3 of us, in terms of our effort in the centre of the map pushing through the port harbour, were able to help the team win the game significantly because we're able to force the enemy team to disintegrate in the centre along with the friendly vehicles that supported us in this effort, and the rest of our team held up the western side of the map long enough for us to make our effort count. And credit should be given to the artillery player on the enemy team who came first both in terms of reputation earned and damage dealt, as we did think they would be the most threatening player on the team by a significant margin in terms of our ability to contribute well, and it is demonstrated here. Looking at our performance in greater detail then, we can see that we fired 16 shots and all 16 landed on target, with the vast majority penetrating as well, seeing as we were firing at closer ranges. And we can see this is reflected in terms of the damage we did at distances closer than 150 metres to the target, whereby we did just over half of our damage at these distances, 2,896 health points. Moreover, in terms of our assists, we managed to pick up a total assistance damage of 2,224, whereby the majority of this was from spotting, but we also picked up 539 HP of assistance damage from tracking the second enemy Challenger 1, which our friendly T-80 was able to put a shell into, and then we finished them off. Our final point of interest is under protection, whereby we managed to ricochet a grand total of 3,032 HP of damage. That is over the HP pool of this vehicle, and is quite a testament in my personal experience so far with armoured warfare. All of the damage we did receive was from high explosive rounds, i.e. from the enemy artillery and from the Leopard 2 AV, showing how effective the overall armour profile of the Challenger 1 is, especially in the front. Well, as far as first impressions go, this has been pretty superb, and I guess to summarise I can say I've found the Challenger 1 so far, albeit over the course of 3 player versus player matches, to be absolutely fantastic, although I've yet to put it into a tier 8 or tier 9 match. The overall armour profile of this vehicle seems to be superb, especially in the front, being able to withstand the force of its opponents, whilst being able to dish out the damage as well through its adequate 120mm main gun, especially with its gun handling. As a result, I'm going to approach closer to medium range engagements for a whole new lease of life, and also occasionally use this vehicle in sniping encounters, seeing as it has the gun handling so long as somebody spots for it, as its overall utility values are very weak, but you would expect that on such a massive MBT at tier 7 I would suppose. Unfortunately, that does mean we're out of time for today in terms of gameplay, and I look forward to bringing some more Challenger 1 gameplay in the future, especially once this vehicle is fully upgraded. a process I'm going to approach now with renewed vigour. But if you have enjoyed this video, ladies and gentlemen, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future Armoured Warfare videos on this channel. But until next time, take care, and good luck on the battlefield!